good healthcare. It also requires buildings, smart buildings, especially which are safe and secure, and they can very closely integrate our growing populations within the cities. And last and the most important is integrated mobility. So when we talk about all these 5 or 6 aspects, the technology provider like Siemens has the best solutions for all these 5 or 6 areas. We are clearly vertically driven organizations having solutions for all this technology. But what is important that this technology needs to be covered up with the information and communication technology. It cannot be standalone. You cannot have a standalone a railway running around from one point to another point. You need to have a connect with this railway, for example, with maybe the bus transport. You need to have a connect with the individual people carrying the maybe smart devices, and you need to have a constant communication with respect to these people as well as this system in an integrated way. And this is where the technology will play a big role. And the last and the most important, when we talk about technology today, somebody said that technology must be all encompassing. Yes, 100%, it must be all encompassing, especially in the country like India, where the inclusive growth and inclusive aspects under technology are most important. And therefore, if you really ask me how do we address this in technology, I think the technology always already have become smart. Yeah, we have also produced many smart products within India to meet these requirements. But this is not only important. We have to ensure as a community of good citizens that we don't go into a typical cycle of an organization or a typical cycle of a government going for a procurement or a bidding, eventually resulting into a very poor quality, poor technology, and I would say run-of-the-mill products and solutions for most of the people, which we are the final users of. I think this is where we have to be very careful. Some time back, there was an announcement where the consultants were appointed for smart cities, and I heard that there were more than 200 consultants. And I was surprised, how can there be more than 200 consultants for such an activity? I think there has to be a very close monitoring, a very close selection, right selection of the people to do this activity, because this is what is going to take us forward in the right spirit. If we go in a typical way in our Indian environment, to go to the lowest L1 bidder and make sure that finally the EPC contractors go and bid for the solutions which normally all of us are going to use for a long time, and especially the next generation, I think then we have to pay the price for a long term. So the technology definitely will come and is available, but we need to be providing the right price for the technology. I think I don't take much of the time, and all the eminent speakers are waiting for giving their inputs to all of you, all of us. So I hereby request our keynote speaker, Srinivas, to deliver the keynote address. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, fellow panelists, eminent dignitaries sitting across, and thank you, Vigyan Jyoti, for giving me this opportunity to share some of the work in progress, I would say, in the area of urban management in general, but smart city, which is a buzzword in particular. So probably what I'll do is I'll just narrate some of the recent developments and share some of those failures and success, and see how we can scale up and connect those experiences in order to catch up with the pace of urbanization that's happening in our country. Typically, this is a typical summary of the current situation in any urban system, be it Mumbai or Hyderabad, where I'm coming from, or even if you go to emerging cities and towns, small and medium towns, there is a complete disconnect in terms of service delivery. Mobility is failing. Citizens are dissatisfied. They're spending a lot of money to cope with the current situation. And there is a total fragmentation in terms of departments, government departments working in silos. Water supply is working differently, sanitation is working differently, uh, mobility is a completely different, policing is different. So how do we cope with this situation when there is a spatial fragmentation as well as functional fragmentation? So this is a current situation which is more or less true, except in certain good cities where there is some amount of planning. Now, given this situation, and given the situation that India is emerging fast, uh, urbanizing very fast, second largest urban system in the world after China, though in terms of levels of urbanization, we are very, very modest. We are just 30%. We have it's India is not an urbanized economy, urbanized country. We are just modest at 30% as per census 2011. But in terms of absolute numbers, it's the second largest. And this urbanization is going to take off in a big way. Some states like Kerala, Maharashtra, Gujarat, they're already reaching 45% urbanization. The theory of urbanization shows that it takes long years to reach a particular point, but once it reaches a particular tipping point, the acceleration is going to be very fast. So it's going to be very rapid in the years to come. And we are going to catch up, or we are going to envisage a situation where we would be actually looking at numbers like what emerging countries are looking at. Emerging countries have already reached 80% urbanization level. With 30% urbanization level, we are struggling to cope with the situation, be it water supply, sanitation, solid waste, mobility. But if you imagine a situation like China, Brazil, Korea, where they have reached 70 to 80% urbanization, the pressure on the system is going to be phenomenal. So, are we really looking at this acceleration that's going to happen? And how do we cope with this acceleration? And most importantly, how do we not only cope, but how do we actually be proactive and create wealth for the country is something we need to look at it. What do we mean by wealth creation? I'll come to that little later. So, typically, if you go by the numbers, in fact, we would be adding one Chicago every year. How do you accommodate this demographic transition that's going to happen? Where do we accommodate? With this demographic transition, the resources are also dwindling. The per capita resource is actually, be it land, be it quality air, be it maybe water resources, it's coming down. So on one side, population is increasing, particularly in urban context. On the other side, resources are dwindling. How do you match? How do you cope? And how do you create urban systems that are very, very productive, and especially the aspirational young population who are not used to the level of urban level of quality of life that we were used to at some point in time when we were studying. So how do you match up with this aspiration level and create economic development is something we need to be looking at, and that's where the technology piece is going to play a very important role. It's not the solution per se, but it is actually part of the solution. Now, with this, incremental growth can happen in multiple ways. How do you accommodate this growth? One is you create new cities, which is not going to happen. In fact, we would be advising, in fact, part of the transaction advisory of a new capital city coming up in Andhra Pradesh post bifurcation. And there is a place called Amravati, which has been recently identified. Creating a new city is absolutely very, very expensive. Globally, we have seen it, as well as we are seeing live. India is not used to creating new cities. And we are seeing the pain that goes through, despite having the top leadership. And most importantly, the cost of creating new cities is going to be phenomenal. So most of this economic, this demographic change has to be in the existing cities and towns, particularly class 1 cities. The new scheme probably minister talked about called Amrut is actually targeting class 1 city, because that is where a lot of growth is going to happen. And rightly so, these 500 top class 1 cities are going to be the absorption points for urbanization that's going to happen. And of course, big cities continue to grow. So creating new city is one aspect of the story, but how do you bring in technology? How do you bring in efficiency? How do you make quality of life of these 50 plus metropolitan cities and 500 plus class 1 cities are going to be a big challenge, and it's a big opportunity for all of us. The most important aspect that we need to reflect on when we are talking about urbanization in India is, I don't want to spend too much time, is its relationship to economic growth. If we were to grow at 7% to 8% growth rate, post-independence, Indian growth rate was about 3%, 2%. What does it mean? Many students are there. What do we mean by this growth? It means bad roads. It means suboptimal sanitation. It means power cuts. Now, if you want to achieve this growth rate of 5 to 7, 10% double-digit growth, which China is doing for the last maybe 4 decades, how do you move forward? It's only through effective urbanization. In fact, urban areas contribute about 65% of the GDP. And if you want to sustain this growth, and if you want to sustain and accelerate this growth and spread the benefits of this growth to the whole population, then we need to manage our cities very, very carefully. We cannot allow the chaotic situation that is prevalent right now to continue. And that's what actually is the genesis of smart city, or genesis of Amrit scheme, or genesis of Jain in Yoram in the earlier things. It is a big issue. It is not just about managing a local government. It is about managing the economy. And that's what we need to look at from the national perspective. Now, we know that in any city management, service delivery is very, very important. And unfortunately, the service delivery situation is very suboptimal compared to the benchmarks. 2008, Government of India has notified what we call service level benchmarks, and we had the opportunity of collecting 1300 town information, data of 1300 plus cities and towns in the country. You would be shocked to see the level of services. The median value is so suboptimal vis-a-vis the goals or benchmarks that are outlined. And this is actually a fascinating subject for management grads who actually use this data to play with and see how one can create data visualization and communicate effectively for common people. You see the per capita water supply, you see the leakages in the system, non-revenue water, you see the customer service redressal system, you see the treatment and disposal, the quality of water we drink. The same situation with wastewater management. If you see, the wastewater coverage is so limited. Now, if you were to really reach the benchmark, where currently we are at 20-25% and the goal is about 100%, how do we move forward? Is it the current system, are we going to continue this way incrementally, or do we need to look at little differently? So there are three approaches. One is business as usual approach. As we know, we continue the same way, the so-called, leave it to the fate and things to evolve. The second approach is incremental improvement, introduce a scheme, introduce a program, introduce a new centrally sponsored scheme, or can we think of a quantum way through innovation? Dr. Asloka talked about innovative thinking. I think we need to start looking at some of these ideas into the urban system. Otherwise, it is not going to really we are not going to come out of this chaotic situation and add value to the economic growth and growth of the country and the nation and reducing poverty. Now, when I got this book as as a souvenir this morning, the first thing I saw on the page is a wheel. It's a very fascinating ancient technology. Wheel is about 6,000 year old. Even wheel is referred, during Mahabharata, Karna got stuck, and then, so wheel is there as a reference point all over, as a fascinating piece of the technology. Similarly, 10 to 15 years back, we used to carry big bags to railway stations, to airports. We used to carry the luggage. And other day I was in a railway station, I don't see any porter, I don't see any labor carrying the luggage. What happened actually? Somebody thought of connecting this ancient technology to a bag or to a box. This connection of connecting a wheel to the bag is actually lateral thinking, is a small, minuscule innovation that led to enhancement of quality of life. Now bring this concept into traffic management, bring this concept to solid waste management, bring this concept to sanitation. I'll give you one more example. As engineers, we were trained to design wastewater systems. Wastewater system has to be, typically, if you are a good city, then you need to have an underground drainage system. Carry this to flush 10 ml of urine. I use 10 liters of water just to flush this wastewater. I go to washroom, then I use 10 liters of water or 5 to 10 liters of water to flush this. Take it through a pipeline, take it to the end of the city based on the gravity, put a lot of energy in it for transportation as well as for treatment and then we call it as innovation, and put another piece of technology called wastewater recycling, and then pump it up back into the city for non-potable application. In the case of Singapore, they use even for potable application. In my opinion, it's actually a very inefficient way of managing resources. What do? Now, Government of India and a couple of other eminent scientists, and we are part of this mission, is to look at toilet technology in a different perspective. Why should I transport this wastewater, whether it's fecal matter, whether it is urine? Why should I take it out? Can this building itself retain this water and treat it and then convert into methane and water? Why should I actually put it in a sewer system? It may not be very practical right now, but it is going to happen in the years to come. I can assure you that. In fact, we are working in a town called Warangal with the support of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and Government of India, where we are testing some of these technologies on the ground. Strip, there's a DPR for 14,000 crore underground sewerage system. We are challenging it. He said, let's keep it aside. Fortunately, government is looking at it in a very favorable way. In fact, with that money, we can cover the whole state of Telangana with better sanitation system, with one city investment in one city. So what we are trying to say is we need to start looking at service delivery in urban areas in a different perspective. And we need to have different set of lens. And that's where innovative thinking is very important. Even a small thing like connecting dots of a wheel and a bag, it led to a significant radical change in the way the material is transported, the way wastewater is transported, the way mobility happens. And I would now present to you some of the case studies, practical experiences that we can actually take it forward, and technology can play a very important role. Now, imagine a city like Mumbai. Practically, I can see, I mean, there is a lot of stories, newspapers, where we have more number of mobiles than toilets. It's a known fact. It's a known fact. Now, when there's so many mobiles floating in the town and city, and when ICT, information communication technology, is so omnipresent, why governments, why this ICT is actually bypassing city administration? It beats my imagination. ICT, information communication technology, is all over.